Hey, good afternoon. Welcome. Thanks for coming along today for the Thursday edition of The Ride Home. Beautiful day out there, isn't it?
Oh, my gosh.
Yes, we had a lunch outside.
We had a rare treat.
Yeah.
We got to eat with our producer, Christy Stockton.
Mm-hmm. It was a rare treat. First time, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where I was wondering, I was concerned that I would chew with my mouth open or pick up food from the floor or like one of the other like things we talked about in the air yesterday,
Right.
which is like
None of that happened.
None of those things happened, but that was the flag for like instantly judging somebody.
Right. And there was really not a lot of pressure for us. I would say more so for our producer, Christy.
Like
Christy,
she was going to be chewing with her mouth open.
Were you a little leery walking into this?
I wasn't sure. I was a little nervous.
What was on the agenda?
Yeah.
There was no agenda.
Sadly, it was exactly like it is from 4 to 6 live
Pretty
weekend.
much. Yeah.
Got that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, we didn't dig too deep, did we?
No, I was like, are they going to like fire me or something? I
Fire
wasn't
you?
sure.
Like we're going to fire
I
you.
thought I was going to get fired.
I thought I was going to get fired.
What?
So at least we all went into it with
Yeah.
similar viewpoint.
Boy, what an anxious, nervous wreck we are.
We had a good lunch at Vincent's in Greentree.
Which is a lovely
An
place.
absolutely underrated restaurant in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
They've been so solid throughout COVID. I mean, I eat there every Friday. But I would just like to tell the listening audience in no uncertain terms that the amount of food that was brought to our table was a little
A
ridiculous.
little much, yeah.
They brought up a second table. If everybody was wondering, they brought us a second table.
And it's just the three of us, right?
They didn't bring us a second drink or another napkin. They brought us
They
another
offered.
table.
Yeah, they did. And our waitress. It's good to go back to
I
a
love
place
our
after
waitress,
COVID.
except I don't know her name.
I
feel
I don't need to
badly.
call
If
my
she's
waitress
listening right now, I just want to say we think you're lovely, but we don't know your name.
But do you feel the need to call your server by their name?
I think that's a very
I don't.
nice gesture.
No. As a former server, I don't want people to know my name. What's the deal there? Hey, John.
What,
can
like
you-
they're going to come find you?
No. If I'm giving good service, seriously, my name is not necessary. It's not part of the program.
What about being friendly?
I'm being friendly. I'm being congenial, but I don't need to exchange names with people. Hi, I'm John. No, I don't think that's kind of weird to me. Don't you think that's weird?
I don't think it's weird. Christy,
Christy-
you think that's weird?
I never like when people call their servers by their name.
Thank you. Thank you,
It's
Christy.
weird.
Again, she's in my corner here.
I said this already today.
Boom.
I feel
I know.
like
I'm
Christy's
sorry.
taken his side a little too much
sorry.
on the
no,
ride home.
she just has good sense.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of.
That's all. She's
taking
just
a drink of my water bottle,
The
which is
heck?
leaking today. My water bottle, which I've had for a very long time, leaked all over Christy's clock.
Sorry for that.
I want
Right.
I want to say I'm sorry again.
Okay, that's a good question for our listeners. Do you prefer to call, and you go to a restaurant, do you want to call your waiter, hey, Susan?
I don't mean the first time, like you go to a restaurant the first time and some guy comes over and like, hey, Jake. Like, I'm not doing that. But we've had the same waitress probably 15 times.
We haven't seen her in 2 years.
So it would be nice to say, hey, Susan,
Hey, Phyllis,
good to
I
see
missed you.
Yeah, or like, well, I haven't seen you in a long time, Joan.
I don't think so.
What do you
Seriously.
want to
I have problem remembering people the names that I work with.
I'm Kathy Evans.
Okay? Hey, buddy.
Kev.
Kev. Exactly. Kevin.
Or Kev.
I mean, it's just too much. Why does everybody have to be so familiar all the time?
What? See, what you want us
Why?
to should we call her ma'am?
No. Oh,
Is that
ma'am's
more
fine.
appropriate?
Ma'am's fine. But someone's going to, do their job and bring me a salad. I don't have to be like their best friend.
I would like to be their friend.
It's over the top. It's a weird mix here.
Okay.
Anyway, let's get involved in the news of the day.
It's a weird mix.
It is. Kath, as we always do, give us the top four. The top four at 4.
It's a strange lead-in.
Okay, Kath. Give me my Parmesan.
For Thursday, September 30th,
Okay.
2021, and may you also be brought a second table today. Number 1. A former Facebook employee says tens of thousands of pages of internal company research she has provided to the SEC prove Facebook is lying to the public and their investors about the effectiveness of its campaign to eradicate hate, violence, and misinformation from its platforms. According to CBS News, that former employee, who anonymously filed the complaints with federal authorities against Facebook last month, will reveal her identity and speak her mind in an interview airing Sunday night on 60 Minutes. The former employee says the documents prove the company knows its algorithms amplify polarizing and hateful content, adding that societies around the world are being torn apart partly because of the social media company. Profit outweighs safety on Facebook, according to the former employee. Number 2. Teen use of electronic cigarettes fell sharply in 2021, the second consecutive year of big declines, according to the government's annual National Youth Tobacco Survey. The New York Times reports today that 11.3% of high school students say they currently vape, down from 19.5% in 2020 and strikingly lower than the 27.5% reported in 2019. Even with the drop, though, the survey found that more than 2 million high school and middle school students were currently using e-cigarettes, which came on the market back in the early 2000s, promoted as devices designed to give smokers the nicotine fix they craved without the carcinogens that come from burning cigarettes. But, of course, they began to catch on with teenagers who had never smoked, once like they were trying to give up cigarettes, they just never tried it. And in 2018, the FDA warned of an epidemic of vaping among teenagers who were becoming addicted to nicotine through e-cigarettes. Number 3, the city of Pittsburgh doing a new thing, looking to team up with professional designers or apparel manufacturers to create officially licensed and branded Pittsburgh merchandise. Would you buy some?
No.
Merchandise could include T-shirts, hats, and more, officials said in an announcement from Mayor Bill Peduto's office. The city issued a request for proposals for designers and apparel manufacturers who can submit their stuff online. The city's considering partnering with multiple companies and encouraging local companies who already market Pittsburgh-themed merchandise. But here's the thing. If it's going to be official, it's going to have a tag or a decal on it that declares it official merchandise to distinguish it from other Pittsburgh-themed stuff, because they're following in the path of New York City, which sells officially licensed merchandise. John, you happy about that?
No.
Number 4. And if you are despondent over the state of the Steelers, and who isn't? If you're in the middle of a 6-year emotional downward spiral with the Pirates, and if you can't believe number 71 is missing the first 2 months of the Penn season, let me introduce you to the Pitt Lady Panthers volleyball team, which is ranked number 3 in the nation.
Nice.
Pitt was bumped up from number 4 last week. They are undefeated with ranked wins over Washington State, Baylor, BYU, and Rice. Experts credit their balanced offense led by Chinaza, maybe? Chinaza Nadi? That's a guess at how to pronounce her name.
Your server.
And Kayla Lund. And that, my friends, is your top 4 at 4.
Very nice.
Isn't that great news about the Pitt volleyball team?
I love it. I like watching women's volleyball. Don't you?
I like watching any volleyball.
Yeah, me too.
I
think it's
really
very,
do.
very
I think it's a
interesting.
great game.
Super athletic, right?
I heard about the ranking on the radio, just a little blip today, and I thought, I want to look into that more. Do you know I could hardly find anything online
No
about
kidding.
it? I mean, there is so little information about NCAA women's volleyball
Really?
online.
So even Pitt PR is not pushing it out there?
I was surprised that there wasn't
too.
more
You'd
there.
think they would jump on that.
I had to dig a little deep to get it. I was
Can
happy
you go?
to do it.
Can you go and watch a game if you're not a student or a faculty member? Wouldn't it be fun to
I
do
know
that?
you have to wear a mask inside, and I know that there are spectators. I'm just not sure if there can be spectators who aren't students.
Right. See.
It's a good question.
Kinda
I don't know.
All righty. We'll take a quick
Wait,
break.
I got a question for you before we take a quick break.
Okay.
Do you know why the city's colors are black and gold? I don't mean Pitt Lady Panthers. I mean going back to like the Pitt official merchandise thing.
I think it goes way back to the 20s. And what is the reasoning behind that?
It does go back to the 20s. How do you know that?
I think 1925. Is
How
it
do
true?
you know that? It's
Just
exactly
things
the
I've
year.
read.
That's exactly the year.
Does it have something to
You're
do with
sick.
the flag of the city of Pittsburgh? Or, I'm not sure there.
They come from the coat of arms of Sir William
arms.
Pitt.
There you go.
They're also inspired by the city flag and the Great Seal, using the colors to spark civic pride. Hit the button.
Very nice.
How do you know stuff like that?
Hi, I'm your server, William Pitt, and here's your calzone. Enjoy your meal. This past Sunday, the governor of New York, the new governor of New York, made a impassioned plea at a church in Brooklyn, where she basically said, "Hey, I have the vaccine. You should get the vaccine, and as God's people, it is the right thing to do."
I think she said. I don't mean to correct you,
All right.
but since you've corrected me so much in the beginning of the show, I feel like it's certainly about time. She said that she thought everybody in the room with her, they were the smart people.
Right.
They
They were
had
the-
all gotten the vaccine. So she was encouraging them not to get it, but to be her apostles,
The apostles
to
of the
go out
vaccine.
and get other people to get the vaccine.
All right. So the vaccine.
She also said she knew that the reason why God had decided that some should live from COVID and some should die through COVID.
She knew.
She knew,
All right. Well,
which is a lot.
it's a very contentious thing, right? Vaccines and masks. We've been talking about that nonstop. Jerry Boyer's with us. Jerry's the host of the new podcast called Meeting of Minds. He is author of The Maker versus the Takers, What Jesus Really Said About Social Justice and Economics. Here today to talk to us about vaccines. Hey, Jerry.
Hey, John and Kathy, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
Okay. I'm not okay. Just hearing that story, I'm already not okay.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, it's just a vaccine, right? It's not a sacrament, nor is it some kind of devil juice. I mean, can we just have a sane conversation,
Yes.
No.
a sane medical conversation about a medical question?
Yeah. Okay.
cannot.
So what you're saying, the plea that you are making, is just that we would look at the vaccine as a vaccine instead of as some kind of like metaphor or some kind of cultural indicator of us being in one group or one camp or another. Right.
Right, a tribal marker.
Yeah.
Remember last week
Tribal
we talked
marker,
about
that's
the
good.
Book
I
of
like that.
Galatians. We got all those tribal markers, and now apparently this one's a tribal marker too, because everything's a tribal marker.
Right.
When people don't have a well-grounded identity, then they have to form an identity. And so we're going to form identities around these tribal markers. What's frustrating to me is Christians already have an identity. We don't need another one.
Yeah.
We don't need we're the smart ones, we get vaccinated, or we're the ones who have discernment and we know that it's the mark of the beast. We don't need other identities. We're able to just be Christians, to accept the forgiveness in Jesus, to amend our lives, and then to look at a medical question unclouded with all of this stuff about having to be a certain kind of person or having to be a certain part of a tribe. Rene Girard said, this is really interesting. People say that we developed, that we stopped burning witches because we developed science. And Girard said, no, we developed science because we stopped burning witches. That the gospel got us out of the crazy purity spirals and fights over everything and superstition. And then we could just look at scientific questions as scientific questions. So can we just evaluate this as a vaccine? The purpose of a vaccine is to decrease the probability of getting a disease that you don't already have without getting too many, say, side effects, without the cost of it being higher than the benefit. Now, I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a biochemist. I'm not going to tell you. I don't have the expertise to tell you that. But as a theologian, I have the expertise to tell you that that's what kind of question it is. It's not a religious question. It's not a who you are in Christ question. That's already settled. It's what Christians in the past would call a prudential question. It's prudence. It's hands-on wisdom.
Right. But then, Jerry, why has, from many pulpits across this country, this become a central issue for believers?
Because I think, Jesus said, go out there and disciple the nations. But that's not really what's happening mostly that I see. Mostly the nations are discipling us. And so nation is ethne, it's ethnic group, but that's really a tribal identity. So what's happening is whatever group we're kind of part of naturally, like if you're urban and you've got a master's degree, there's certain like preset things you're supposed to believe. And if you're rural and you're a high school graduate and you're certain preset. Now I know there's people who are exceptions to all that, but there's this demographic stuff and we're part of these groups. And so instead of going to Christ and saying, Christ, I want to be like you and imitating Christ, and then going out there and taking Christ to our tribe, instead, increasingly, we take our tribe into the church and try to evangelize the rest of the church based on things that really aren't core Christian issues, like, for example, whether to get a vaccination or not.
Right, which is what the governor of New York did on Sunday, right? I mean, from her perspective, or from people who are in leadership in the church's perspective, it was a good thing, because she was going to come into the church and she was going to tell people the right thing to do so that all the people could be right and do the right thing. Right.
Yes. And right. So if she wanted to go there and just do a public service announcement, I got vaccinated, I think you should too. Okay. I'm not sure that belongs in the pulpit. In fact, I'm pretty sure it doesn't. But, sometimes ministers will let people stand up and, do announcements. But that's not what she said. She said, go out and be my apostles. That's blasphemy. Mm-hmm. Really. I mean, honestly, that's blasphemous to do that. By the way, I speak as someone who got vaccinated. Every member of my family is vaccinated. So I'm not anti-vaccine. But I didn't think that I was receiving a sacrament. And by saying that, I don't think I'm being an apostle on behalf of the great needle, that saves us from our uncleanness. And that's what happens when you don't have God. Then you have these religions that are completely scientific. And so now
and are just weird. They just end up being weird.
And they don't convince anybody. You hear something like that. I mean, when I hear something like that, I kind of have a reaction like, gee, I wish I hadn't gotten the vaccine. I don't want to make her happy, which is a kind of crazy thing. And it lasts about 3 seconds with me. And then I'm back to, all right, it's a medical question. And that's, a commentary I recently did for the Salem stations says that what I'm seeing is the harder the ruling class pushes on this, the more people push back. So this shaming about vaccinations, I think, is kind of driving people to not get them. I had a friend who had a company that sold tchotchkes on various kinds of items, and one of them was T-shirts. And he had a T-shirt, and on it there was a Confederate flag, and on the back it said, "Just because you told me not to." And so
wow.
I wouldn't wear a Confederate flag. That's not a cause I'm sympathetic with, slavery and rebellion against the Union. But people kind of went towards that just because someone told them not to. And the more that they do that, like just today, it's announced that YouTube is going to start taking down anti-vax videos. Now, I've seen some of these videos, and they're crazy nutso. But we're not infants. It's our job. What we have to do is learn to be discerning, and we're not going to learn to be discerning if they essentially like toddler-proof the house of YouTube, so we don't see anything that questions the vaccine ideology. And in fact, this stuff is going to multiply the conspiracy theories. They're going to look and do the connections with the yarn in the garage, and okay, here's YouTube, and here's Bill Gates, and here's the Illuminati. It's not going to make things better. What's going to make things better is everybody makes their case, you make your decision, and then you live with the consequences of your decision and learn from that. Right. That's how people go from being children to being grown-ups.
Okay, so we are living with the consequences, right? We're not going to reach herd immunity in this country, most likely. We still, even by us having this conversation right now, Jerry, there are people on their phones or out their laptops, they're typing hate towards us and saying, listen, right, you guys, this is the mark of the devil, this vaccine, and, you guys are part of the problem. And that's where we are in the country.
Well, sure, but it's not the mark of the devil. I mean, even if you believe that there's going to be microchips with 666s in them, right, there aren't any microchips with 666s in this vaccine. It'd be a pretty easy thing to find. It's out there in a lot of doctors' offices. You can look in the microscope. Is there a little microchip in there? No, there isn't a little microchip in there. And by the way, wouldn't it have to go on the forehead? I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
So it's not rational. The one that I'm seeing a lot of is that it has aborted babies in it.
Right.
So I did a 2-part series for Christian Post in which I said, look, I'm not saying get the vaccine or not. I'm just saying I want to know the truth. Let's ninth commandment this thing. Does it have dead babies in it and dead baby cells? And it doesn't. So the actual facts are, they're not that remotely. There was an abortion in 1973. That is an abomination to God, in my opinion. I think it's a horrible thing. So they took some of that tissue and then they made clones of it. And then they made clones, and then they made clones. And then they've done that for 60 years. And so thousands of generations of clones later, some of those clones were used indirectly in some of the research having to do with the vaccines. Now, if you object to that, that's fine. That's a theological discussion we can have. I think that's not what goes into a man that makes him defiled. It's what comes out. So I don't think that 2,000 generations ago, an abortion which is an evil thing, that taints this clone of the 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 clone, like more times than I can say, so that using a vaccine, remember that those clones aren't in the vaccine. It's that the knowledge is in the vaccine from those. That's a moral question we can have, but let's at least get the facts right. There's no dead baby parts in these vaccines. We should stop saying it. And we shouldn't pass it around. Just, oh, that's really interesting. I'm going to share this YouTube video on social media, and without checking it out and finding out if it's true, and it's not.
Jerry Bowyer is with us. Jerry's host of the new podcast, Meeting of the Minds. He's also the author of a terrific book called The Maker versus the Takers, What Jesus Really Said About Social Justice and Economics. Jerry, that brings to mind something that I see a lot, that I just, there are just some things that just sit with you the wrong way. They just kind of, that you think about them, you think, I can't believe we've come to this point. One of the things that really gets me in that place is when I read people who are talking about the word research now. So we So we got an email, just for an example, yesterday or the day before or something, talking about John and my attitude and our conversation about the vaccine. And of course, as part of that, which is like every other email we've gotten about this, do your research. I'm not sure how that word research has become boiled down to just going online and looking at websites you like that tell you what you already believe. I mean, that's the antithesis of what actual research is. It's like, I'm on like a one-woman crusade to reclaim the word. I don't know how we've gotten here. Jer?
I see it all the time. You do your research, or I'll even say, show me the research. And it's a copy and paste of some guy on YouTube.
Right.
And then, so I'll ask, no, that's not research. That's someone that's an opinionator who's serving a market. I mean, people monetize these. I mean, you can really grow your YouTube presence by pushing this stuff. There's no doubt about it. You can make good money doing it. So to me, research is not some guy on YouTube, not a headline from a publication that's in your favorite. An algorithm shows this to you because the algorithm knows you want it. That's not research. If the great algorithm in the sky says here and puts it in front of you in your social media feed, that didn't take any effort. You're just receiving what it knows in advance you want. It doesn't mean reading headlines. It doesn't even mean, to me, it doesn't mean reading the articles. It means looking in the article where it mentions a study, and then the study will be blue if there's a link. And then you click on the study. And then at the very least, the study will have a 2 or 3 paragraph abstract. At the very least, read that. I wouldn't call that research. I would call that maybe some study. Research would be then you click and you go down and you look at the data. That's research. And that's not what people are doing and what they're calling research. And I can tell you that every time one of these theories comes across my social media where someone says, do your research, and I say, okay, give it to me. Show me what I'm supposed to look at. Some guy on YouTube, click on this, click on this, click on this. When I get down to the bottom of it, the actual data has so far never backed up what they're saying. Now, I can't chase it all down, because I've got a day job. We can't be chasing this stuff down all the time. But how many times do we chase it down before we say, we've got a broken thought process here, which is basically they say research, but what it really is gossip. Mm-hmm. Right. That's all. It's just gossip. Yeah. Just passing along what they heard.
Right. Okay, Jerry, we need to take a quick break, but you have a final sort of capstone on the idea of vaccines and where we are in America?
Oh, my God. What am I opening myself up to? Because there's so many disputes about the facts, whether there should be or not, there are, because there's so much confusion. Christians should not judge other Christians for getting it or for not getting it. Because when you have this level of confusion about the basic facts, it's the moral questions become obscured. So, of course, if the vaccine saves lives, of course, Christians would get it. And of course, if the vaccine has the microchip in it and it's going to kill you because it's poison, well, then, of course, you wouldn't. So applying Christian moral principles involves knowing Christian moral principles, but also knowing the basic facts of the matter. And we don't know the basic facts of the matter, and we don't have trusted sources. Therefore, we need to give each other leeway, because the person who's on the other side believes different things about this than you do, because somebody they trust told them different things. And once you take that into account, then I think just give everyone some room and treat it as meat sacrificed to idols. You feel that way about it. My conscience says this. God bless you. Be at peace.
Amen. You didn't open yourself up to anything.
We'll see.
John Hall at Word FM, Kathy at Word FM.
We need to step away for just a minute. Hey, have you ever read anything that's been so vile or so disgusting or just inflamed you so much you think that book needs to be banned? Well, it's Banned Book Week, and we'll talk about that with Jerry next. Well, the ancient Chinese did it. The Greeks did it. Here in America, we've been doing it since the Puritans. That is the burning or banning of books. Jerry, Banned Book Week, does it mean anything?
Well, it's one of those publicity things, and it's one of those things where
we congratulate ourselves on being open-minded.
Exactly. We do. We congratulate ourselves on being open-minded, and we can dump on people who aren't, and we can play the role of a victim. And of course, the weird thing about that is if you look at the banned book list, you can go down to your local bookstore, and not only are the books there, but there will be a prominent display. There'll be, here's the banned books.
Ooh.
Buy the banned books. Here they are.
Dangerous.
Dangerous, right? What was that old banned in Boston? That's how you sold a book. You say, because Boston used to be very puritanical. You say banned in Boston, and then people want it. The problem is that they don't say anything about the Bible. I've looked at the banned books list, previous years, and they don't mention the most banned book of all, which is the Bible, which means that's the really dangerous one. The really dangerous one is the one that's so banned you don't even get to acknowledge the fact that it's banned,
Right.
because that is an admission of its power. So I just find that kind of interesting that there's a whole bunch of pro-trans books and critical race theory books on the banned list when we're inundated by that stuff. I mean, Amazon's pushing that all the time. I mean, it's not my reading pattern, and yet Amazon keeps shoving it into my face. So there's got to be some algorithm that's pushing that out there. These are the very opposite of banned.
So Fahrenheit 451 is the book that we, of course, it is for any of us who've read it, it comes to your mind when you're thinking about banned books. Now, you've done something that I have not done since I was 14, and that is read the book. Now, I barely remembered the plot of the book, but I was impressed when I read your article, Jerry, because you gave details of it that I literally do not remember. So in case anyone out there is like me, doesn't remember details of the book, there are a couple of very important ones that seem to be left out of recent cinematic versions of the book.
Yeah, so you read it 10 years ago, and that's good.
I was a child bride.
So I've read it more recently, and I think that it's really fascinating. The book is cited a lot. It's one of the and the American Library Association and their banned book crowd, they talk about it a lot. They talk about this book,
But they haven't read it either.
I don't think they have read it. And they have, Ray Bradbury awards. He's the one who wrote it. Ray Bradbury was a Christian look, it's generational. He's Christian Buddhist. That's what he called himself. So
I love those.
But he was very influenced by the Bible and seemed to basically have something like a Christian faith or Christian affirmation, if a bit muddled. And it's interesting, in the story, the main character, Montag, the book that awakens him, the first book he goes to that makes him realize that we shouldn't be burning these books, is the Bible. That's his awakening book. And then later, he talks to his wife and he tries to awaken her, and he reads from Matthew Arnold's poem, Dover Beach, which is a poem about the loss of faith. It's about how about how Europe had lost its Christian faith and was beginning to fall into violence, and ignorant armies clash by night is a famous line from the play. And while he's doing that, from the poem, and while he's doing that, jet planes are going overhead and there's some war going on, and nobody knows anything about it. So this is a book about how the lack of faith is leading to the destruction of society. And then later Montag escapes. This is not spoiler, but the book's from the 1950s. He escapes and he goes and finds a colony of people who've memorized books, and he meets someone who's memorized the book of Luke. Now, in the 1960s, they made a movie out of that, and they took all the Bible stuff out. They took out the fact that he read the Bible. When books are being burned, there's a whole bunch of existentialism and atheist stuff that's being burned. They took out the Dover Beach conversation, and they took out the memorization of the Gospel of Luke. Okay, so that's in the 1960s. Recently, HBO rebooted it, and this is amazing. In this reboot, they don't mention the Bible as banned. The chief book burner is giving a speech to students, and he recommends that they read the Bible. That's one of the few books that and Moby Dick, I think, those are the only books really that are worth reading. So they've completely inverted the story. It's like they took Bradbury's book and tore out a page and burned it, and then made what was left into a screenplay. And that's how much afraid they are of the word of God, which is living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword. So cancel culture doesn't scare me. Cancel culture tells me that they're scared.
Yeah, that's really good. Jerry Bowyer with us. We need to step aside. When we come back, Jerry, I want to delve a little more deeply into books. We don't often talk about books that shaped you, the books that make you who you are. So in these seconds while you're waiting in the commercial break, I want to ask you that question. What are the books that you feel like made you who you are? We'll talk about it next. Right home.
Okay, so you go into someone's house and you look at their bookcase. It's a good litmus test on who that person is.
We
isn't it?
love that. When John and I go to people's houses,
Go hang up
like
by your
everybody,
bookcase.
everybody else is like talking to people and eating
they
food,
reading?
and we're like in the corner peeking at what they're reading.
Yeah, Jared. So
I love that because it's a window into that person's deepest self to me.
yeah, how they choose to spend their time, what they're feeding on intellectually.
Exactly. What's going on inside?
Right. So, Jerry, we kind of put you on the spot here, but, you're a reader. What about those books that you loved? Books that formed you as you grew up?
Wow, that's really tough because it's so hard to
Narrow
boil
down,
it down.
right?
Yeah.
Because reading has formed me a lot during my whole life.
How did that happen? Wait, so tell the story, because I take my reading back to my aunt who used to lay in bed and read to me. Was there someone in your life, was it your mom or your dad or a teacher, who said, you need to read and read well?
My pop-up, my grandfather,
Yeah.
who kind of raised me. My dad left, so we were a broken family. That was kind of unusual at the time. So my mom and I lived with my grandmother and grandfather, my paternal grandmother and grandfather, which is kind of unusual.
Really?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So my mom lived with my dad. My mom and I lived with my dad's mom and dad. And my pop-up was a voracious reader. I mean, he was a couple of things. One, he had a job as a machinist for Bethlehem Steel, but he also owned his own small business, a bar, and I kind of grew up around there. But whenever he had any free time, he was reading.
Nice.
And so I was imitating him, so I was reading. Now, he gave me kid books to read, Tom Swift books and other science
yeah.
books. He
Yeah.
gave me science and
Yeah.
science fiction. So I loved a lot of that, and biographies of scientists. Then my grandfather passed away when I was about 13 years old, and I inherited his library. And he was a socialist and an atheist.
Wow.
So I got all his socialist atheist
Good
books.
for you.
So I read them. And so I read a lot of Karl Marx, and I read later on Herbert Marcuse and Bertrand Russell, Why I'm Not a Christian.
Yeah.
Very formative book
Sure.
for me.
Okay.
And, I was sort of brought up in and around the church, but I was never really convinced of anything. I was just around it. So I read these atheists, and I went to the minister and I said, I don't believe in God anymore. He said, well, why not? And I said, well, why should I? Right. And he said, well, doesn't your mom believe in God, in God, or your dad believe in God? And I said, well, it's not passed on. This is about 16 when I had this conversation. It's not inherited. So, and he didn't have answers. So I left the faith to the degree that I was in it, and read a lot of Marxism and a lot of atheism. Everyone's talking about critical theory and critical race
Yeah,
theory.
sure.
I was a teenage critical race theorist. And so that's my horror movie. So, and it caused me to ask questions. Then I started to read a lot of Thomas Aquinas. This is in high school.
Okay.
This is what I did instead of going to class. I just went to the library, went to the great book section, blew off all my classes, and read Aquinas and Aristotle, and Augustine and Freud.
And are those the
Darwin
ones
and
that
Marx.
started to persuade you into faith?
Started to get me there. C.S. Lewis got me a little bit more in that direction. And then I ran across an obscure thinker named Cornelius Van Til, who almost no one will have heard of, that really kind of got to me into the deep knowledge questions. And that was instrumental in my conversion. So that's about age 19.
Interesting. Now, were you in school at the time, or were you working, or how did that happen when you were 19?
That's fascinating. I had graduated from high school, barely. I was working a job as a manager at a movie theater. There was a local Presbyterian minister who rented the movie theater to show a Joni Eareckson Tada movie,
Nice.
As an evangelistic outreach.
Yeah.
He came into my office. I had a Greek New Testament open that I was reading, not because I believed it, but just because I was, exploring. So what he did is he said, okay, I'm going to give you books. And he just, for like a year, he was just giving me book after book after book. He had a doctorate, very well educated. And so that really was what formed me theologically in reform.
And he was a believer, and he was trying to encourage you down the
He's a
path?
pastor.
Yes, and challenging me, and had exactly the kinds of answers that I needed, that I didn't feel like I was getting. I didn't feel like the traditional apologetics was deep enough philosophically to really answer.
Yeah.
I wanted Christianity to be true, but I didn't want to pretend that it was true just because I wanted it. So I didn't have something that really answered at a deep level.
Fabulous. So a movie theater, Joni Eareckson Tada,
That's
and
good.
a pastor who was engaged.
I love that. Okay, so what do you like to read now, Jerry? So if those are the things that formed you, and I appreciate knowing that, what about the things that are forming you now?
I read a lot. I read a lot of biblical archaeology.
Biblical
because I'm trying, and
archaeology,
I
okay.
read the Bible a lot, and then I read historical figures who are writing at the same time or about the same time that the Bible is going on.
Wow.
So I'll be reading the Gospels, and then I'll read, what did Josephus say about this? Or what did Philo say about it? So I'm reading I'm not reading your typical like thought leader stuff that Christians do. That stuff's great, but that's just not what I'm pulled to right now. I'm pulled to just a much greater level of detail. So I'm reading a lot of Greek and Hebrew grammar. I'm reading a lot of the Bible in the original languages. I'm not trying to I read the Bible in the original language. Just you asked a question. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And kind of like deep in reading the rabbis who are writing in the 1st and 2nd century to help understand the Jesus context. So I'm spending a lot of time in original languages and original sources, and also reading archaeological reports about what we know about that time, so that it's almost like I'm reading the Bible over and over and over again. And then I'm reading anything I can to help shine light on the Bible that I'm reading.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you're reading something like that Josephus wrote that informs the Bible. There's the echo within that goes straight to the heart of it all.
Right. So when Jesus talks about, when Jesus is on his way to the cross and he says, if this is what happened, don't wait for me, women of Jerusalem, if this is what happens when the wood is green, what will happen when it's dry? Mm-hmm. He's saying, so, things are actually pretty good now and they're still killing me. What's going to happen when things are really combustible? Well, Josephus tells us what happens over the next 40 years, how the wood gets drier and drier and drier, and it's more like kindling. And then in 66 AD, there's a debt revolt. And then that basically sets into motion violence, and then their whole society is destroyed. And I'm, in some sense, almost obsessed with seeing our wood become dry, with seeing how much we're becoming like kindle, because that's what happens when you're not connected to the vine. You dry, and we're not connected to the vine, and we're drying, and we're becoming like kindling, not like Kindle, like kindling, and that can easily be set on fire. So it feels like this is the crisis of our age. Are we going to follow Jesus? All of him, not just the word Jesus, not just I believe in Jesus, I'm saying Jesus, and I'm going to beat you over the head, but actually follow the Jesus that we find in the Gospels? Or are we going to break down into these warring tribes? Jesus warned about that in the Gospel accounts. And then Josephus he picks up after Jesus's resurrection and then kind of just lays out how that happens over the next generation. And I see that happening to us as well. And it's terrifying in some sense.
So then what you're doing here is very interesting. I'm sure it's not unique for a certain subset of people, but this is something of your own creation. You have not gone to a source material and said, I'm going to go back and read these people. But for people who are listening now who don't have that intellectual drive that you're doing, is there a thread, something that you know of that has those sort of parallels?
Like a study plan or a reading plan, something?
Well, C.S. Lewis had a big influence on me. And one of his famous essays is on the reading of old books. Mm-hmm. And he says, try to read two old books for every new book.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I tried to do that. So don't read about Plato, read Plato, read Aristotle, don't read about Aristotle. So I tried, so as much as possible, just force yourself to read the old books. It'll get you out of your own generational headspace. In terms of people, however, who are new, there's a couple of authors I find very helpful. One is N.T. Wright. Mm-hmm. I think Tom Wright has maybe more than anybody been able to put the Gospels in historical context. Another is a Christian anthropologist named Rene Girard, who's not easy to read, but I think he explains how we form tribes, how the tribes war with one another, how the war becomes a contagion and then leads to a scapegoat process where we all get together and kill somebody to try to restore peace. So he's explained that more than anybody else.
Well, I don't know why you think that's applicable today.
It's just amazing how much you read what Girard was writing even in the 50s and 60s and how much it's anticipating where we are now.
That's fascinating. Hey, Jer, time's up, but take a second and talk to us about the podcast, Meeting of the Minds. People want to engage you there. What do they do?
Well, meetingofmindspodcast.com. They can go there or just type in Jerry Bowyer Meeting of Minds. And what they'll get is a lot like what they just got with the three of us.
Very good.
Terrific. Well, we're happy to meet your mind today.
Very good, Jerry. Always a great pleasure. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Jerry Bowyer, Meeting of the Minds podcast, as you just heard. Also, his new book is called The Maker versus the Takers, What Jesus Really Said About Social Justice and Economics. You can find Jerry all over the web. He's on Facebook actively and Twitter as well. We'll take a break, come back.
So happy to have Jerry with us in the most of this hour.
He's fascinating.
He
Isn't
sure
he?
is, and
I love him.
He's been a terrific friend to us for a long time. And if you missed any of the first hour, please find our podcast wherever you get your podcast. Just look for The Ride Home with John and Kathy. We're on over 40 different platforms, so I'm sure you'll find it.
And streaming now on YouTube.
And streaming exactly at The Word Pittsburgh. Okay, so he talked about, Jerry did, when we asked about the books that formed him and the books that are forming him. And a lot of that is tough sledding, reading-wise. And so when I look at the books that formed me, they're simpler than that.
Simple. Well, I don't know. Yeah. But they are near to us because they are of us, right?
Right. And so as Jerry's talking about his list, I'm thinking about my list.
Yeah.
And you as a listener should be thinking about your list. And
Yeah.
don't feel, superior or inadequate or whatever it is. We all read things that made us who we are.
Right. Well, I'll say this. I was raised by Catholic nuns. And in 7th grade, this young nun showed up.
I mean, not that you didn't have parents.
No, but I mean, I was informed, I would say, by
yeah.
Catholic nuns. In 7th grade, this young progressive Catholic nun showed up. And most of the year, she essentially had us read out loud. Or we read, she read to us. She read 2 books that changed my life. The Grapes of Wrath and Black Like Me.
Interesting. Yeah.
Which whenever I just was astounded in the thought process and in the storyline of both of those books, The Grapes of Wrath and Black Like Me. I had never considered that as a young kid growing up in Swissvale, what those lives were like. And truly, they went deep into my bones. Those 2 books were seminal in my life.
Wow, that's really interesting. It's interesting that one of those books is fiction, because when most people talk about the books that formed them, they talk about nonfiction books. But I also was mostly formed by fiction books. The number one book that impacted me in my whole life is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. And my dad bought it for me when I was in 3rd grade. And if you've never read her or never read the book, it's hard to encapsulate it. And if I try to explain it to you, it's going to sound weird. But it's a science fiction book written for kids. But what it does is at least what it did for me, is it enlarged my imagination about what God's purpose for a person might be and what impact a very normal day could have on a universe.
A normal day.
Just a normal day.
A regular day.
Could have on a universe. And it tells it through fantastical creatures, through a Christian worldview to a kid.
That's fabulous, yeah. And it's a very complex but a very simple read.
I read it when I was in 3rd grade.
Right? Yeah.
But I read it again last year because it's that good.
Very nice. All right, we're going to step away for just a minute. How about etiquette? Is etiquette a thing anymore? Can a 1952 etiquette guide help us to entertain and navigate today?
You think
That's
I had bad manners at lunch?
I don't know. White gloves and all. That's next on The Ride Home. during COVID lockdown, those especially a few fraught months where we saw no one.
Yep.
I was thinking a lot about entertaining. And not unto itself is sort of a antique phrase, isn't it?
I was going to say.
Right.
Entertaining.
We're entertaining. We're
My
having
husband
guests
and I
over.
do a lot of entertaining.
Right. Now, I mean, it's good to have guests over, right? It's good to have friends over. And, you know, now you would say, we're not entertaining. We're just hanging out.
We're having people over.
Right. But there is, or at least was, a certain time in American history, a certain class of people who were involved in a stricture, I would say, of proper etiquette on the necessity and the rules of how to entertain properly.
And they were of such influence that filtered down to the average person.
Well, I remember watching old black and white television shows, right? And seeing people, quote, entertain.
Like Dick Van Dyke.
Right.
What was her? Richie was the kid.
Right.
What was their name?
The Van Dykes, Dick Van Dyke's family?
Yeah, what was his name on there?
The Petries.
That's right.
So the Petries would invite Buddy and Sally over, and
Right.
and they would play games.
And they would sing
Right.
and dance and perform with the band in the living room.
And you would think.
And
that
she
is-
would make ribs
Yeah, the height of
in her
sophistication.
perfect pedal pushers.
Or everybody would wear,
A dress and heels.
and the men were wearing ties.
Yep.
And, everyone looked very debonair.
They'd
in a
invite
way.
the boss over.
And so as a kid, you'd think, that's what it is to be an adult. Okay, so an old book, 1952, it was written, Amy Vanderbilt's Complete Book of Etiquette. And in it, it details the intricacies of what it was to entertain post-World War II America.
And we're talking about this because it's in today's Wall Street Journal.
It is. So what the Wall Street Journal has done is taken snippets of the original book, the reality of then, to an update for today. All right? So here, rules for hosts.
This
and
is
in the
gonna be
book,
good. Okay.
she says this, provide a menu. Formal dinners are accompanied by a printed menu, writes Vanderbilt.
Oh, my gosh.
Quote, always in French, script, or written in script-like handwriting.
All right.
The Post says, verdict, a home printer makes this simple to pull off, and a little theater is always fun, but French might come off as très corny.
Can you imagine coming into, I'm
Someone's
going
home?
over to Christy's house and she gives me a menu when I walk in?
Here's the menu. Burgers, fries, right?
Or just mac
That's
and
what I'm
cheese?
having. Make a picture. Here's what Amy Vanderbilt says. If a carefully planned meal is meant to be the evening's highlight, a host who fancies himself a mixologist might, quote, take away the emphasis on dinner and put it untastefully on what should be an incidental procedure. Mix only one kind of cocktail. The verdict, says the Post, the idea of a pre-selected cocktail might annoy some guests, but the logic behind it has its merits. Mm-hmm. So everyone's having,
The same thing.
martinis.
Okay. I don't make cocktails, so I couldn't identify with that. I think it's much more fun to have different drinks for people.
Of course.
It just is.
Right.
I mean,
You mix it up.
if you want to have your Hawaiian punch when you come to my house, and knock it out.
Here's my favorite. Follow the leader. When the dinner is announced, quote, the hostess usually leads her women guests into the dining room with the men following, the host bringing up the rear. The men step forward and hold chairs as the hostess indicates where each lady is to sit. Then, at her cue, the men seat themselves. The Wall Street Journal says, even if you wish to resurrect this forgotten bit of dinner ritual in the name of social anthropology, your guests would need stage directions and a dress rehearsal to pull it off. Simple can also be elegant. Mm-hmm. That's like a little parade walking in, right?
It sounds like what cattle do when they're being moved from one pen into another.
Well, there's a flow.
There is. Now, I feel like I'm being dismissive of, I am being dismissive of
Because
it.
it feels
so forced.
ancient.
However, I appreciate the fact that there is something about manners that is a good thing. I mean, when William Wilberforce was, beginning his campaign against slavery in England, it was also a revolution for manners, because he felt like all of society, that their embrace of slavery was shown in many other areas that they had declined overall in every regard. And so as they rejected slavery, he believed they would also tend to embrace just gentility and gentleness in life, which included fairness to animals.
A higher ideal.
A higher ideal for all of their living.
Right.
And one thing, when you think about social media, it is profoundly rude.
Oh, it breaks my heart. I mean, the things that you read, people's comments about the simplest of things, or you know, sometimes the most heinous. I read something yesterday that was so absolutely vile that I thought about it throughout the evening. It just...
Was it on social?
Yes, it was about a toddler and people's reactions to this. It just, we have so far gone beyond the norms of what polite society. I mean, it feels. I mean, even this conversation that we're having right now, I know people are rolling their eyes and thinking, "Come on, you two."
Yeah.
I'm not espousing we march in a parade-like fashion to a dinner party and pull out chairs.
No, because that's ridiculous. To me, it is.
But there is something about a higher ideal.
Yeah. There's something about cleaning ourselves up.
Presenting ourselves.
And acting like an adult.
And if we do it physically, socially with each other, in our minds, I think we try to rise to the occasion as well. We act as if we are actually better than ourselves.
Do you feel like the way people dress is an example of that?
Listen, my sister...
Or an outgrowth of it?
My sister was this is again an old... My sister was a stewardess for Allegheny Airlines way back in the 1960s. And so when she first started to be a stewardess, of course, she was wearing a little pillbox hat and white gloves.
And you were a little kid watching that?
Yeah. And they had to measure, from her kneecap to the hemline of the skirt. It was everything was very carefully plotted out. Well, she retired in the 80s, late 80s. And, she bemoaned the fact that people are just, bringing plastic bags on the airplane as their luggage. She saw sort of like, the fall of society, what we would ascribe to as polite society and where we are now. And for better or worse. And I'm sure there's a lot more better to it in some ways, but there's also a lot of worse to it, that we've lost our moorings in some way. I don't know.
Christy, from your perspective, you're 27 years old. Do you feel like people
seems crazy.
Do you feel like people have lost their moorings? Do you feel like they're impolite?
No.
Unmannerly? Okay.
Maybe maybe growing up with technology, they've always just been that way for me.
So people have always been rude and kind of, I don't know, dismissive?
Have you ever been to a dinner party?
No, I don't think.
See, when I lived in New York City, I was a bartender and would bartend at dinner parties. And again, it's a socioeconomic thing. People of, another status would gather together in gowns and tuxedos.
Really? In gowns and tuxedos?
Yes. And I would be, the bartender in the living room mixing, Tom Collins or martinis or, whatever. And you would see that. And me, a blue-collar kid growing up in Swissvale, I was amazed. I was in awe in some ways that I found myself in this setting. And it was like being in a museum. But I loved it so much to sort of peel back this veneer and see people from a totally different perspective, in an economic class.
Okay, what did you see?
What I saw, actually, more often than not, was great fun and humor. This was a different class of people. They didn't have the same worries that we did in Swissvale. They were talking about things that were far beyond me, that I appreciated. It was a peek into something that was...
So they didn't make you feel badly about you?
As a servant, there were people who would look down their nose at me. But, I was the bartender, so everyone's nice to the bartender.
I was going to say, you're everybody's friend.
Right? I just appreciate the idea of us finding... Whether it's me reading Black Like Me or being in a penthouse on Park Avenue, in life, you will find yourself in certain situations that if you have the wherewithal... you're able to fit in and react in kind. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, or learn how to.
That's all. That's the whole point of it, I believe. How do we find our way through life and do so with good grace and humor? Mm-hmm. That's all.
Dan Darling is with us. We haven't talked to Dan in a while. Always happy to have him on the show. He's the author of several books, including The Dignity Revolution, The Characters of Christmas, and his latest book, I think it's his latest book, The Characters of Easter, The Villains, Heroes, Cowards, and Crooks Who Witnessed History's Biggest Miracle. Dan, good to have you. Welcome back.
It's great to be with you. Hope everything's going well in your part of the world.
It sure is. I mean, it's a beautiful, sunshiny day, Dan, and we're happy to be here.
We sure are, Dan. Okay, so like you, we follow along, look at media, whether it's television or online. And I think some of us, follow along pundits that we sort of elevate to maybe not godlike status.
You mean like on social media?
Yeah, right. I mean, whether it's, social media or it's on the tube, right?
Right. So maybe it's an influencer, or maybe it's a pastor, or maybe it's a writer or an actor.
Yeah, and those people are important to us.
Could be a politician.
Right? So we look at those people and they think, these guys have the answers, and I'm going to follow along with these guys. But, more often than not, in the modern world, it doesn't sort of equate to what the structures that we need that historically are important, Dan. And there is a big divide, right, between the sort of sweep of history and what is right and true then and now, as opposed to, sort of the tweet that's important for us to know about. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, what we have, we're in this digital age where it's so easy to find content. And in many ways, that's good because, we have access to really good content. You could stream sermons and read great articles, and, you can study the Bible online. You can do all kinds of things. You can connect with people in ways you never could before. But yet also, we're more prone to being shaped and formed sometimes by voices throughout the week that may or may not be healthy for us. And so I think one of the things we need to think about in this age is, what is shaping and forming our hearts? When I was a kid, my parents, I think rightly, warned me about the way that pop culture can kind of corrupt our hearts. And as a parent, I'm sort of shielding my kid as much as I can from some of the worst of pop culture. But I also think we need to think, even as adults, about how political content, opinion content, all that stuff that may or may not be good, how that also can corrupt our hearts a little bit and shape and form us in ways that are at odds with what Christ wants to do with us.
I think it's a big challenge. I find it a challenge for myself, Dan, because there are certain voices. I mean, we're all like that. There are certain voices that we like, that we gravitate toward. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to go for pastors right now. So, some people absolutely love John MacArthur, right? And whatever John MacArthur says, and listen, if you're looking for a book, you should go look at the books that John MacArthur's publishing house puts out. Mm-hmm. Or you're going to find someone who absolutely loves everything the Pope writes and everything he talks about and his whole attitude and his more progressive outlook on culture and faith. And then there are other people that are going to find, a Russell Moore he's the guy that I really follow. And I think that any of those people certainly have benefits and have done a lot of terrific things in life. But if you only follow the one person, or you decide that he's the one or she's the one that's going to be the arbiter of everything good, and if she likes it, then I like it, or if he likes it, I like it, then I don't know. I feel like I'm always being sucked into some silo or some subgroup that's making me dislike the other groups.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I think we need to have discernment, right? Where we read, we listen to great podcasts. Look, I'm someone who writes books and writes articles, so I want people to read those, and everyone else does. But I think most of all, we should be formed and shaped, first of all, by the spiritual disciplines, by the word and prayer. But I think secondly, just by our local community, our local body of believers. And I think having community where we share the same faith, we share the same beliefs about God, about the scriptures, but people come at things from a different perspective, and it can be sharpened a little bit that way, to where we don't make one or two voices the sole sort of arbiter of what we believe. Even good voices, right?
Yeah,
even
sure.
voices that are important. I think we need to be wise about that. And really, I think I'm actually more concerned about the way that we're slowly replacing spiritual content with, I think, cultural content, political content, to where, we might go to church once a week and hear a sermon, but 5 days a week we're getting catechized and shaped by, our favorite pundits on Facebook, our favorite political podcasts, and all those things can be really good. But I think we just have to be careful. When I was a kid, my parents would always just tell me, what goes in your mind shapes you, garbage in, garbage out. And I think there's a spiritual principle in Romans that talks about us renewing our minds. And I think we just really need to get back to that.
Right. Okay, so Dan, then you, as a writer, a thinker, someone who got some influence here, who are you following along? Right. I mean, the thing I think I find fascinating is that we all try to follow. If you're so inclined, you try to follow a wide variety of voices, opinions,
Hopefully
and
you
styles.
do. That's
Hopefully
healthy to try to do that.
But the problem is, though, that now with the boogeyman in the corner, which is the algorithm, it pushes you into a little bit of a box and keeps you away from things you would not necessarily find if you were so, in the older days, intellectually stimulated to go out and reach for different voices. So are you able to break free of algorithms and sort of discover voices that you would not necessarily have found, just out there searching?
Well, I think we have to be intentional about, as you said, reading, listening to from a wide variety of voices and people that might challenge us. I also think we need to just cultivate good community so that we have friendships and conversations with people who are not listening to the same people we're listening to, or maybe aren't listening to anybody at all. Maybe they're not as engaged online. Maybe they're listening to other voices, and we can sort of have those back and forth that can sharpen us. I think it gets very I get very worried when we get into kind of these bubbles where we all, on every single thing, and I'm not talking like the core truths of the Christian faith. I'm talking about pragmatic issues like how do you educate your kids, or what's your approach to COVID, or some of these things where good people can have different approaches. I think it's really harmful if we are in bubbles where everybody sort of nods their head and agrees with everything, or if we're in, as Kathy said before, if you're in these kind of subgroups where your sole identity, your sole purpose is hating on another group, right? Like
that's a bad sign.
Like if I think we do need to be discerning. We do need to worry about heresy and drift. But if every day we're getting up and we're thinking of other Christians that aren't doing it right, maybe something's wrong with the way we're approaching things. That we're being shaped and formed to hate and despise other Americans, other Christians even.
That division in the church is even. I don't know if it's worse. I'm not sure what's worse, because that division that it has been developing over the last decade, American versus American, is certainly something of great concern to me. But I think it's a deeper concern is the vitriol that Christians regularly approach other Christians with, and I don't get where I guess I have a lot of ideas as to how that's formed in a person, but I guess I'm surprised at how we tolerate that with other Christians and how we've just come to see that as part of contemporary Christian life, when I think that it should be called out wherever we see it, whether it's in our local churches, in our neighborhood. Believers can't treat other believers like this.
I agree with you. I'm really grieved by the disunity. And what's really grievous is, for the most part, it's disunity not over core issues of Christian orthodoxy that we can't budge on, but it's over secondary and tertiary things where good Christians just come at it differently, and we're fighting like crazy over these kinds of things. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think number one is, as John mentioned, we're in an age that incentivizes extremism and incentivizes disunity and discord. But as Christians, we don't have to go with the spirit of the age. We can defy the spirit of the age. And one of the ways we can be countercultural is to be a unifying spirit across divides. And we can even do this online. I mean, we can be people who will commend various people, even if they don't agree with us, or even when we have spirited disagreements, which I think are important. Can we not say, hey, listen, I strongly disagree with you on this. I land in a different place than you do, but I really value your opinion, and I'm thankful for this engagement. Or, I don't see it the way you do, but I understand why you come at it from that perspective. Just that kind of spirit. Romans tells us, as much as possible, live at peace with all men.
Yeah.
When you look at all the traits in the New Testament for spiritual maturity, whether it's the traits for spiritual leadership in the church or just the fruits of the Spirit in other places, they all mention issues of temperament, of gentleness, kindness, not a brawler, not quarrelsome.
Yeah.
These are markers of spiritual maturity, and I think we've forgotten that.
I agree. And, I as you and Kath bring up this point, Dan, I think about this. How many times have you been, at church, and maybe there's, a Wednesday evening meeting or, before church on Sunday, and there are different opinions that are traded, or there might be even harsh words between each other. But then when worship starts, and this has happened to me, you disagree with someone, and then all of a sudden, you're in worship and you look across the aisle and you see that guy or you see that woman, you think, man, this past week, I was being unkind towards that person. And now I'm together under this umbrella of Christ. All that gets wiped away. Hopefully it does. Or, someone's serving communion and you think, here we are, all of us sharing the body of Christ. I mean, would we go back to that and think about that and engage in that with a regular, on a regular basis, that all of us are in the body of Christ? If the church can't get along, then what hope do we have for the world?
Right, and I think we need to elevate the pursuit of unity as something that's very important and not some kind of a nice side benefit if it could happen. When I read the New Testament, it seems to me that we should actively pursue it among brothers and sisters. And I think we each have to ask ourselves, I can't control the whole internet and I can't control the whole body of Christ, but as much as I can do in my world. So when I'm engaging online and I'm having back and forth disagreements, can I be the person that ends this well and says, hey, listen, we disagree here, but man, I'm thankful for you and I'm grateful for you. Or even in our in-person conversation, like if you have a spirited disagreement with a brother or sister in your church or your community about something that's important to both of you, can you come to a place where you say, man, I disagree with you. I don't see it the way you do, but I love you and I value you as a brother and sister in Christ. I mean, this is the whole point, that we come, as you said, we come on Sundays and we worship God and we share the cup and share the bread together, not because we're like all the same, because we're so different. We come from different places, different backgrounds, different ideas, but we share this love for Christ, and we share the fact that we're all sinners who have been given this amazing gift of grace. Amen
to that. Dan, always a pleasure. Thanks for being with us here today.
Take care, Dan.
Thank you both. Appreciate you and the work you guys do.
Yeah, we feel the same way about you, Dan.
Daniel Darling, author of The Dignity Revolution.
Maybe he could make it into a thing. He could host it. doesn't make sense.
Does what make sense?
Garbage bags.
Yes. Of course. What do you mean?
Here's my frustration. We generate garbage,
Yeah, a lot of it.
and then we put it in a bag. And then we carry the bag downstairs. We carry the bag outside. And then we put the bag in a can. And then the wonderful garbage men who've worked the entire time during COVID, never took any time off and never were able to stay at home and work. They come get it and they take the bag.
Yep.
And they put the bag in the truck with all the other garbage. So now we've added to the garbage. We've added more garbage because that's the garbage that's wrapped around the garbage. And so all of a sudden, last night, I was like, isn't there a simpler way?
No.
I feel like we should have a chute or something. We got a garbage chute.
Garbage chute?
Yeah.
Like the main garbage chute?
No.
I
The
always thought
garbage
that-
chute goes right from wherever we're generating our garbage, and it goes out to a unit that gets emptied into the garbage truck, and then we're saving all the bags.
Right. I always thought that if there was a garbage chute, it would go like into a volcano. That would like burn up right away.
That's a great idea. I'm sure that wouldn't generate any difficult gas for the human
I
to
don't
deal
know.
with.
It's already a volcano. And anyway, the garbage bag makes sense to me. Of course it does. What are you
Okay.
going to use? Like put it out in the
Okay,
curb?
so what
like
I'm saying
raw garbage?
is in right now it makes sense, but ultimately it doesn't make sense. It's more garbage. Okay?
I don't know. That made sense. All right. Does this make sense? Chipped ham. What the heck
Is that?
is chipped ham? Okay. First of all, it's a loaf. It's not like roast beef. It's a loaf. Now look, I've eaten 1 million chipped ham sandwiches in my life, and I like it. However, if you bring someone in from out of town who's out of Pittsburgh and you go, you want some chipped ham? They're going to go, what is this? It's weird. You know it's weird. And I had a friend who was in a meat processing plant, and she'd go, you do not want to know what's in chipped ham. So chipped ham, does that make sense? Because really, what is chipped ham?
I got to say no on that.
Yeah.
And it pains me. It pains me because I too have had 10,000 chipped ham sandwiches.
Yeah.
But there is something seeing it in solid form, the pre-chipped form, that makes you think that there's something
Nefarious.
going on in there.
Tawdry.
It's manufactured.
Of course it's
It's
manufactured.
not a natural product.
No, I mean, no. Some part of the, cow or pig is not the chipped ham part.
And try to explain to someone who's not from Pittsburgh what a ham barbecue is.
Yeah. Garbage bags make sense. Of course they do.
No, I mean, ultimately they don't,
Chipped
but we
ham?
have to have them right now.
Kind of on the
I
shelf
don't
there.
think so.
High school. Was it a good time for you? Did you like high school?
Yeah, I liked high school.
Were you a good student?
I was I think I was an okay student.
Well, no, you weren't a C student, were you?
No.
You were better than that.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean I was a good student.
Okay.
I was not trying hard. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Because you're having a good time. Mm-hmm. Because you enjoyed yourself. Mm-hmm. Right. High school?
What about you?
I loved high school.
Did you?
I laughed a lot. And I'm telling you, I just barely graduated. I was happy to hear Jerry Boyer say that earlier in the show.
Yeah, so Jerry Boyer was with us in the 4 o'clock hour. If you missed any
Made me
part
feel
of
good
it,
about that.
please find our podcast, The Ride Home with John and Kathy, wherever you get your podcasts. We're on, 40 plus platform. You find it.
I could have cared less.
Jerry barely graduated from high school.
Made
also.
me feel great. Jerry Boyer, I was like, I could have cared less. I mean, more often than not, I skipped.
Christy.
What kind of student were you in high school?
I was an okay student.
Okay, student. Did you like the classes?
If I paid attention.
There we are.
But she
right?
didn't. You
Yeah.
can tell just by the way she said it, she didn't. Okay, now let me say this. I don't mean to skip ahead, but I was a much worse student in college.
Oh, what?
I was a terrible student in college. When you ask, if you would ask me like, hey, Kath, what are your life regrets? That would be at the top of my list.
Get out.
Top of my list is how I squandered college. I was a terrible college student.
What are you doing here? What happened?
Trying to redeem myself.
No, I mean, I would say that, from outward, you're a very good student.
I became
see-
a good student after I finished college. I was a terrible student in college.
Well, I loved college. I loved college. I went to-
Didn't John just have a charmed life?
No, I mean, I went to school for theater. I mean, I laughed. I played. I created. I loved it. It wasn't until I got to New York City where I learned the business of show business. And then I was like someone slapping me in the face.
Daily.
Oh, okay.
And repeatedly.
I better figure this out. How does this work?
College, Christy.
I loved college.
Yeah.
Way more than high school. I would go back to college.
In a heartbeat.
If I had the money. Oh, yeah. High school? Nah.
Yeah. High
Okay.
school was very complex. Wasn't there a lot of weird pressure in high school? Like if you were like one of
there's
the
a lot
smart
of weird
kids,
pressure in college too, though. It's different though.
but I always felt bad for like the super smart kids in high school because they always seemed like
I know it.
they were carrying the weight of the world
You
on
think
their
of who the
shoulders.
valedictorian? Did they have valedictorians when you graduated
Yeah.
from? Okay, so they don't have valedictorians anymore.
What? Oh, good God!
Right, so there's no valedictorian.
Or
But
we're hurt
in
someone's
your
feelings
each
about being
one of us
smart.
has in our head our valedictorian or like the top 3 or however you did it in your high school, and you at least I bet all of us in some way, shape, or form pitied them.
Well, but you know what? There are valedictorians, I'm sure, are listening right now, going, "You guys are crazy. We had a blast."
I'm sure.
right?
But
I would say generally the burden of being the smartest people in the class.
it's a lot to bear.
Yeah. Okay, I saw this piece today at Study Finds, which is a place we go to often. School success often leads to vicious cycles of perfectionism and depression, right? Many high school students feel unyielding pressure to succeed academically. This leads to a constant pursuit of educational perfection that inevitably leads to anxiety and full-blown depression in many cases, according to a study. A fight that feels like a never-ending scholarly battle just to prove that they are good enough. How about
That's
your
horrible.
kids? Did you put pressure on your kids in high school? Or was
I
that
was
self-made?
Well, I think some of it with my kids was self-made, but my husband and I were really intentional about talking to our kids about the value of learning, because I think I was so intentional because I felt like I had squandered so much of my learning, my classroom time, that I just didn't want them to do that. So I don't think we ever really cared what the grade letter was, but I very much cared, and my husband really cared about how they were learning,
The mechanics.
how they approached learning.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that's probably my failures help their successes.
Yes, it's for sure the case with me.
Yeah.
And we would have missed out on that if I would have pretended that it wasn't like that.
Right.
You know, if I would have acted like, oh, no, I was a great student. No, seriously, I was really good in college. I never tried to do that because why? And it really ended up benefiting my kids.
Okay, listen to this. This study that we just talked about. Study authors tracked 604 Canadian teens from 7th to 12th grade and looked to examine both relationship and typical sequence of events between academic achievement and perfectionism. Researchers define perfectionism as a maladaptive personality style involving self-imposed high standards that have a link to the development of anxiety and depression.
Okay, I have bad news for you.
What?
I feel like I don't know Christy well enough yet, but you and I suffer from that now.
Well, you want to establish a high bar for yourself.
Right.
Right.
So even if you had a good time in high school and I had a good time in high school and you loved college and I was just a horrible student, but we have ended up in that place as adults.
Because you judge yourself by your peers.
Yeah.
And you think, wait a second, that guy and that they're doing,
Yes.
and what are we?
Look at the two people we had on the show today. We had Jerry Boyer on the show today. We had Dan Darling on the show today. Both of them are incredibly prolific in what they write, what they read, and what they produce. And every time I talk to the two of them, I'm like, I don't do anything.
Okay.
They're so well read. What they write is so helpful. But I'm useless. I always think that.
You think would you rather be?
No, if you say, Kathy, are you useless? I know enough to say, well, of course I'm not
Well,
useless.
no, right.
But in the moment when I'm talking to these two guests that we had on the show today, who we deeply appreciate,
I love
I
them.
always feel inadequate to both of them.
Would you rather be happy or smart? Would you rather be happy or smart?
Well, you can't be both. Is
No,
that what study finds us telling us? So this
I don't-
article is saying you can't be both.
No, they're just saying the anxiety that is in a young person to be the smartest or to be the best devolves into a perfectionist attitude, which colors a lot of people's lives, and a lot of people who are really at a high achievement level despise themselves later on in life
Yeah.
because they haven't risen to a
Right.
standard, and no matter what they do, it's never good enough.
It's never good enough.
Whether it's informed from outside sources
Right.
like your parents or the burden that you have created for yourself.
Yeah, or the people you follow on Twitter, or the friends that you
Those
have,
coconuts.
you know what I mean. That's just the way it is.
Twitter coconut. I mean, seriously. Do you care what those people on Twitter? Do you
No,
care about those
No, but look at the people we follow on Twitter that we really respect. Those are the people I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the yahoos.
Yeah, but you know what? What I take from Twitter is how much I laugh on Twitter,
Well, that's good.
right? I mean,
That's not the first thing I think of when I think of Twitter.
I do.
Okay, good.
I think about people,
Okay,
the
Christy,
angry people and the funny people.
Okay, what do you think of on Twitter?
Like, what do I think of the people on Twitter?
No, what do you go on, like when you think of Twitter, do you think, oh my gosh, I love to go there because I laugh or because I learn things, or why do you go to Twitter?
And I go to Twitter for sports news.
Hey,
Okay, so that's where you get your news.
Yeah.
Okay, so the people you follow, do you follow them because you like their personality, or do you follow them just because you get information from them?
Some people I like their personality. Some of them are funny. Some of them are like, nah, I just follow you for your Pittsburgh sports knowledge.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you don't go to Twitter because that person makes me laugh every time.
I mean, like, I have a follower that, like, I always get the notifications.
Yeah.
Because they always post funny things.
Okay.
So that's, like, the only follower. But no.
Ed Wiley.
Oh, yeah.
I don't even know Ed,
I don't
except
do
I
any
follow him on Twitter.
notifications. None.
That's good.
I don't want that stuff cluttering me up.
That's why you don't know when I text you. No, I'm
Right.
kidding.
I don't. I really don't. I just happen to, look, there's something. Mm-hmm. Notifications, whenever they ask for that,
Remember when notifications first started?
I don't want any.
And I remember when they came, I don't remember what year this was, but I remember when notifications started thinking, well, this is terrific because you can really stay on top of things. And then it was like,
a tsunami.
you were just like
Every
staring
time
at your
you
phone in
breathe.
horror. Like, how could all these things be happening at one time?
And then what did you do?
I turned off all my notifications.
Please, that only makes sense.
That's horrible.
It's too much to bear.
So you don't have any notifications
None.
at all?
Nothing.
None.
Every time I sign up, nothing. I don't want to know about it. I'll go find it if I need it.
That's good.
Don't tell me about
Do you
it.
do
'cause-
notifications?
Not on every app, but a lot.
Oh,
yeah.
no.
Yeah.
I got to know where my Amazon packages are.
So you don't do that?
Nope.
Like you don't say, like
Nope.
Amazon, like we just delivered your package to the
Nope.
front door.
Nope. You know how I find out?
Huh.
I look outside. I mean, I'll find out sooner or later if I need to know.
Because it was too much.
It's too much. It's like this. Would I rather pick up a newspaper and choose to read it whenever I had the time and find the information that I thought was interesting, or have this one after another, this tsunami of 95% of it's useless to
Okay,
me?
what if one of your kids calls you?
Fine.
But you're just going to find out when your voicemail shows up? Or?
He's flagged. Those boys are flagged.
Oh, okay. Oh, but we're not flagged.
I see how it is.
They're I mean,
Yeah. Okay. So if it's one of your kids or your wife,
my wife
you'll
or my
know.
kids. That's
you'll
it.
know.
Otherwise,
that's it.
Nope. If I happen to look at my,
That's bold.
it's not bold.
That is
it's just
bold.
common sense.
I mean, I don't have a lot of notifications, but I have some.
Nope. No. If it's going to happen, it's
I
going to happen.
like to know the injury report before
I
a
don't
game.
care about that.
You don't care about the injury report before
Nope.
a game?
Mm-mm. I'm going to
I
sit
like to
down and
know
watch
that.
the game. That's
Okay.
all.
And you're going to be surprised. You're going to say, "Oh,
Whatever.
Malkin's out for 2 months, and I didn't know because I turned off my notifications."
There were not notifications in 1968 in Swissvale. Why do they have to be in 2021
All right.
here in Green Tree?
All right, fine.
I'm sorry. Does that
That's
make me
good.
seem like an old guy?
No, you're not an old guy.
no, I'm an old guy.
I kind of respect it.
No, just.
But
it's too much. Too much information.
Okay.
Too much to process.
All right.
Perfectionism, right?
Be careful of it.
Don't feel bad about yourself because you're more than good enough. Okay, we'll step away. What are we coming up against? here?
International Podcast Day.
Oh,
That's
again,
next. Yeah.
there's more. More stuff I don't need to know. It's just too much. Turn it off.
Happy International Podcast Day.
Do you listen to podcasts?
That's what it is. I sure do. I love podcasts. And so I've got a list of the top 50 podcasts from the second quarter of 2021. Do you listen to podcasts? No.
Generally not.
No.
I mean, I listen to 99% Invisible,
Okay, which is a terrific Roman Mars podcast.
but not really.
Okay,
When I've got free time, like making dinner,
yeah.
I listen to music.
Okay,
I know that's kind of like a podcast time,
Yeah.
But I'm driving in the car.
you don't,
I'm listening to music
Christy.
All the time.
Yeah,
all the time.
Me too.
All the time.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to give you the top 10 most listened podcasts second quarter of this year. See if you listen to any of those. Number 10, Ben Shapiro Show. 9, Serial. 8, Office Ladies. 7, Pod Save America. 6, My Favorite Murder. 5, Stuff You Should Know. 4, This American Life. 3, Crime Junkie. 2, The Daily. And number 1, Joe Rogan. Do you listen to any of those, Christy?
I listen to 3 of those.
Okay, which ones do you listen to?
Ben Shapiro,
Yeah.
Office Ladies, and Serial.
What's Office Ladies?
The Office, it's Jenna Fisher.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Right, of course. Right.
Oh, how was
and,
that?
Oh, it's great.
And what about Serial?
They have different stories of like crime.
True crime.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got it. Okay.
When do you listen?
Sometimes in the car, sometimes while I'm here at work, or before bed.
Okay. What about you? Top 10?
I listen to Joe Rogan and I listen to Stuff You Should Know, which are both awesome. I also have absolutely loved the rise and fall of Mars Hill, which is a Christianity Today podcast, which they've done such a good job of. And I really, really love Gangster Capitalism. I think that's also, you can disagree with the subject matter. That's up to you. But just as far as the production values and how the stories are told, I think it's really, really great. Okay, top 50 podcasts. I'll just highlight just a couple of them. The NPR Politics podcast is in the top 50. The Mark Levin Show is in the top 50. Rush Limbaugh's Timeless Wisdom. The Breakfast Club. The Moth, which, how long The Moth has been around, right? Rachel Maddow. Freakonomics podcast. Bill Simmons. Michelle Obama. So a lot of these are personality driven. Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. Dan Bongino. Dave Ramsey. I already said Ben Shapiro. Wait, there was another one up there. I was looking for Dak Shepard. That's the one I was looking for.
Dak Shepard.
Yeah. His podcast was number 18 for the quarter.
That's a good one too.
Yeah. I've never listened to that. I like him, but I've never listened to it.
It's good.
Is it? Yeah. Anyway, but check out our podcast, would you? We're not in the top 50, but we'd love to have you join us. So whatever your platform is, find the ride home with John and Kathy. Have yourself a great night, Pittsburgh.